Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and we're back with some more Total War Warhammer 3 gameplay, this time with a complete new race reveal, the Ogre Kingdoms. The Ogre Kingdoms are a race which have been very popular in the Warhammer Fantasy franchise. In fact, they were one of the most popular in 8th edition too, and obviously due to their positioning, it obviously makes sense for them to be the pre-order incentive, meaning that you'll get them completely for free if you pre-order the game or purchase the game 1 week after. But after which, if you want them, you'll need to pay for them if you're watching this video way down the line. So just like all the other factions so far, we're going to check out all their mechanics, all their different things that make the Ogre Kingdoms unique compared to any of the other races. So without further ado, let's begin.
The ogres feast to honor Greasus the Over-Tyrant. Their appetites are ferocious. I must be wary.
Time's up, wizard. No. Put him in the stew.
Wait! Untold power can be harnessed from a dying god.
Power? Ogres take what they want. What more power do we need? Oil the pot! Fresh meat!
Please wait! The god is a bear! You can't devour it!
Quiet! A bear, you say?
Sounds tasty.
Shut up! A new meat. God flesh.
Enough for you, your warriors, and your god, the Great Maw.
I can smell it now. Roast god ribs.
A feast like no other.
You're no meat eater. What's in it for you?
My book reveals a path to his deathbed. I will show you the way for one drop of Ursun's divine blood.
One drop. But ogres get the rest.
That is the deal. Our goal is to claim Ursun. The ogres will eat their weight in god flesh and throw the leftovers into the Great Maw.
I'm getting hungry, Yumi. Best start spitting out advice, or I'm gonna use your bones as toothpicks.
At once, Horde Master. The bear's roar has made the tribes restless. Other tyrants eye your mighty girth and are envious. The Cross Club's tribe plan to take your crown. Remind them who is the Over-Tyrant. Destroy them and subjugate any other tribe that dares to withhold tribute. The Firemouth is a sacred site. Claiming it by force or bribery is a powerful act and shall give you a base to expand westwards. Further south is the dwarf stronghold of Karak Azam. It should be cracked open, and its riches added to your own. For we will require immense wealth if you are to hire the best ogres to invade the Chaos Realms. You will be busy, mighty trade lord, but the reward for your efforts is the god meat of Ursun. Let the feast begin. For the Great Maw hungers.
Oh, Great Maw! What should I do with this piece of gristle? Does it go in the pot? No! I say, first we listen to him, then we can eat him.
If you need meat for your pot, then we should start with the dwarfs, Great Prophet. The Karaks will be tough to crack, but the taste is surely worth it. Further along the pass lie ruins. The Tome of Fates tells me that Skaven hide within. There isn't much flesh on the vermin, so you must slay plenty to fill the cauldron. And where the Grey Mountains end is the true treasure. Marienburg, a city rich in gold and supple flesh. Beyond lies the Empire. So much blood for your part. enough to summon the rifts and hunt for god meat in the realms of chaos. Of course, it is possible to bypass the dwarfs and head straight for the heart of the Empire, which is ripe for plunder. But perhaps that's a riskier strategy. Listen to your gut, Great One. Let its rumble guide you, and together we will seek Ursun and finally sate the Great Maw.
So let's start off with the Over-Tyrant Greasus Goldtooth, who starts off with 3 units of Noblars, 1 unit of Noblar Trappers, a Stone Horn, 2 units of Iron Guts, a unit of Ogre Bulls with additional hand weapons known as dual weapons, and a standard unit of Ogre Bulls. The starting army is actually pretty good, especially since you begin in the Mountains of Morn, where you're surrounded by a lot of potential enemies. You're going to have to move around a lot, you're fighting with other ogre tribes, you've not only got that, but there are some dwarfs in that area, Cathayans to your east, Chaos to your north, and obviously to your west. We're still waiting, but we know that the Chaos Dwarfs will eventually make their appearance. Until then, it's greenskin factions, so you will have a lot of very different enemies to fight throughout your campaign. Greasus's faction effect is a bit of a mouthful. Trade Lord Greasus, Tribe Stealer, Drake Crush, Gate Crasher, Horde Master, Goldtooth, the shockingly obese. And its effects are as follows: Diplomatic Relations plus 20 with Ogre Kingdoms, so this will help you out with any types of confederation if you attempt it, but brute force is usually the best way. Income from trade plus 25%. Yeah, trade is going to be very, very useful, especially for Greasus. And finally, unit mass plus 25%, meaning that your units will be harder to knock down. This is something that's relatively new when it comes to Warhammer, as it's now become a factor that you can edit with mods and so on in the future. And Greasus does have his own unique trait known as Over-Tyrant, which has the following benefits: income from raiding plus 50% Lord's Army, upkeep minus 50% for Iron Guts units in Lord's Army. This will be useful down the line, believe me. And finally, income from sacking and looting settlements plus 50% Lord's Army. So as you can see, Greasus likes money, he doesn't want to spend it, and he wants to get more of it. This is very common with his lore, so if you're familiar with that, you'll understand why these effects are in effect. In terms of skills, obviously Greasus will have the typical ones which will focus around administration, building up your troops, or even buffing up himself, but he obviously does have access to his own unique skill line, which has a variety of different benefits. This not only increases, say, the diplomatic relations with other ogres, but it can also increase the armor and leadership of his ogres. He can buff up pretty much anything. He can even do more damage against other Ogre Kingdom factions and have his army do the same. It's just one of these things because obviously the Over-Tyrant has to make all the other tribes bend the knee. Greasus does have a lot of unique skills. You can see obviously above there is some other ones which will focus on a variety of different things. It will buff him up to with a variety of different types of Noblars, which are just kind of skill points. There's also a small but very important skill line focusing around camps. Camps are very important when it comes to anything relating to the Ogre Kingdoms, especially if you want to have some sort of a capital and recruit some high tier units and so on. So that's going to be covered a little bit later on in the video. But as you can see, there's a lot to work with. There's a lot for you to play around with and so on. It really depends on how you want to do everything. Greasus himself has pretty good stats, so I wouldn't say that you would need to work on the yellow skill line too much. So if anything, that skill line itself doesn't take priority, at least that's how I've been playing. Big names are a new mechanic only available for the Ogre Kingdoms, and as you can see, Greasus has 4 unique ones which are, well, tied to his titles too. You're able to unlock these various big names. As you can see, the unlock requirements are on screen right now, and these will then provide certain bonuses, like for example, melee defense plus 5, unit mass plus 30%, or even something more administrative like income from trade plus 4% and income from all buildings plus 10% in local province. It's very up to you, depends on what you want. You are able to switch around through all the different titles, but there is a cooldown attached to it. And finally, Greasus has access to 2 unique items, one being the Scepter of Titans and the other being the Over-Tyrant's Crown. These are both fairly powerful items, as you can see. One reduces upkeep for a decent amount, the other one increases control for all provinces. I'd say that you need to get these as fast as possible. Keep in mind one thing, I have reported this, so I'm not sure if it's going to get fixed in the future, but the item, which is level 7, is automatically rewarded, but it doesn't automatically equip, so you will need to go and manually equip it. I've sometimes forgotten about that myself. Next, we'll look towards our second legendary lord, Skrarg the Slaughterer, who starts in the Grey Mountains. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird position. But that means that you're surrounded by Imperial factions, specifically Altdorf being very, very close, so if you want to fight Karlfrans at the very beginning, you can do so. There are also some dwarfs and Skaven, but let's talk about the starting army. 3 units of Noblars, 1 unit of Noblar Trappers, 3 units of Gorgers, 1 unit of Saber Tusks, a unit of Ogre Balls with additional hand weapons, and a unit of Ogre Balls Standard. It's a very different army compared to Greasus. This is more focusing around skirmishing combat, but you're able to do a decent amount of damage nonetheless. Skrarg's own faction effect, known as Prophet of the Great Maw, has the following benefits: campaign movement range plus 10% for all characters, hero capacity plus 1 for butchers, and hero recruit rank plus 2 for butchers. All these effects are useful, as obviously you want butchers as they are your main spellcasters, you want them to be as strong as possible, and you want to be able to move quickly. You're not really surrounded by any potential allies, everything's pretty much an enemy here. So if you can take the fight directly to them with the extra campaign movement, well, that's a little bit better for you. Skrarg's own unique trait, known as Gore Harvester, has the following effects: casualty replenishment rate plus 8% for Gorger units in Lord's army. And upkeep minus 50% for Gorger units in Lord's army. Gorgers will be quite useful for you. While they are not the strongest unit, you'll be able to get a lot of benefit, especially since they're so cheap. The bottom skill lines are as normal, boosting up your units, obviously some administration stuff, and having access to magic. Skrarg has access to the Law of the Great Maw, known as Gut Magic, which is fairly powerful and can do a decent amount of damage. Interestingly enough, however, no yellow skill line, nothing to boost up Skrarg specifically in just the usual sense. His stats in a whole are pretty good, so you don't really need a yellow skill line. I just find it very curious that he doesn't have access to one, really. Obviously, Skrarg has access to his own unique skill line, which, interestingly enough, is separated. There's no, you need one to move on to the others type of thing, which will allow you to summon Gorgers. You'll be able to get more campaign movement range, even reduce the cooldown of certain spells and so on, get some extra wins of magic power reserve. It's very focused on spellcasting, as you can expect, because he is quite the powerful spellcaster, and you will get a lot of benefit with that, especially if you tie him with some extra butchers too. Big names are of course also available. Skrarg has his own unique ones, you can see them here with their unlock requirements. They're not too difficult to come by, and these are quite useful because meat is something that we're going to be talking about very soon, and meat is so important for the ogres, like you have no idea. I'd say all of them are pretty useful in general, they all have pretty good benefits. It is easy to forget about these, so do check and make sure that you're trying to get the requirements out of the way as soon as possible. That's my only suggestion here. And lastly, Skrarg has access to one unique item, which is the Cauldron of the Great Maw. That's what's actually attached to him, which reduces upkeep to units and makes him a little stronger. It's quite good. You'll be able to get access to it at rank 10. Obviously, you have to do a quest battle, but you shouldn't have too much of an issue, especially if you build up a camp early, which will allow you to get some better units really, really quick. Naturally, the ogres have their own unique research tree, which has a bunch of different benefits. This is the main way how you'll unlock camps, by the way, so technology is very, very, very important. So what I'm going to do now is stop talking, allow it to play out, so you can see all the different tech. There's some pretty interesting ones there, which I imagine some of you are going to go straight for directly. It just depends on your type of playstyle, really. Okay, so now let's talk about settlements, the basic type, right? Here we've got a provincial capital, and you can see that they can only get up to tier 3. Ogres, when they take over any type of settlement, can only get them up to the maximum of tier 3. So you will have access to resource buildings, landmarks, and basic military, some defenses and infrastructure, but nothing too out there. In fact, you won't even be able to get your own full roster through normal settlements. In most cases, standard settlements will focus mostly around being your economy, helping you generate meat, helping you generate some extra cash, and so on, but this is the side thing more than anything. Now, these buildings are still fairly important, as you will be able to recruit some basic units, but that later gets expanded upon as we progress through this video. Now, this has been mentioned a few times, so we're going to start talking about meat. You see, meat is a new resource which is unique to each of your individual armies. This is also what sustains your armies, and it is extremely important. You see, you gain meat by battles, buildings, camp circle of influence, characters, events, and technology, but it's consumed on army upkeep, events, offers to the Great Maw, and pre-battle feasts. As you can see, Greasus currently costs 10 meat per turn, as he's got 10 units in his army, himself included. You'll start off with a decent amount of meat, but as the turns go, you'll start losing it unless you start getting into fights and so on, and this can be quite a bit of an issue, because if you run out of meat, your ogres will start fighting each other. Yeah, you'll start to suffer attrition. It's not that hard to manage, there's loads of ways to gain meat, and the best way is just to keep aggressive, and you know you're an ogre, so yeah, it's going to be easy enough. This is a resource that you'll need to keep a track on, because the benefits offered by meat are great. It's not just your army's upkeep, but everything else. So, say for example, getting into fights. You are able to then use a pre-battle feast, as you can see, and what this does is allows you to buff up your units. So the more meat that you add in, the more you're able to increase your speed, your unit mass, and your charge bonus. The maximum is 10% from all of them, and yeah, I mean, charge bonus for 10%, unit mass for 10%, you're going to be quite the powerhouse. I myself have been able to use this with some very fast Iron Guts charging into the enemy, or even some Mournfang cavalry, and being quite devastating. Defeating armies will obviously gain you meat, but you're also able to ransom the captives, process the captives into even more meat, or just eat them to get some replenishment going. So either way, you're going to be able to get this resource without too much of a problem, especially if you start moving out of the Mountains of Mourn and more into flat land where there's not so many twists and turns. You can also use meat for offers to the Great Maw. I'm saying meat so much that I'm actually getting kind of hungry, but this is temporary bonuses that you can bestow on individual armies by just spending meat. And you can see here that the bonuses are not too bad. Increased melee attack, extra campaign movement range, a decent amount there too. Global recruitment duration -2 turns to the minimum of 1 turn. This is going to be extremely useful later game. And Winds of Magic Power Reserve +5 per turn. All of them are pretty good. It depends on your proper playstyle and so on. But I'd say out of all of them, Fill Your Bellies, like I said, is going to be the most valuable. So one of the heroes that you'll be able to get is the Hunter, which you'll be able to get at the very beginning with Greasus just by fighting the first enemy. Now, Hunters are very curious because they are very well represented from the tabletop aspect. You see, they're able to buff up all your saber tusks. You've got a lot of skills for that. They're able to make them very, very deadly. They're obviously also able to buff up themselves with a variety of different skills, so you have 2 unique skill lines, and you'll also be able to mount them up on a Stonehorn. In fact, that the Hunter is the only lord or hero choice which is able to be mounted upon anything whatsoever. The Stonehorn itself is very, very powerful. Hunters are great. They've also got a range attack too, so you're going to want to have them at least 1 in your army, and if you're intending on recruiting any battle kitties, it has to be with a Hunter. You want to be able to boost them up a little bit too. Hunters and so on will also have access to big names, so we're not going to talk about it for every single lord and hero choice, but as you can see here, they're kind of randomly generated. There's a few different things. There's one which is quite interesting, the Unbreakable Noblar units for all units in army. It's different, I've got to say. It's interesting because that means you can more or less build up a Noblar Doomstack, but yeah. Now, you do have access to 2 unique lord choices, one being the Tyrant, which is your melee lord, the other being the Slaughtermaster, those of which have 2 variants, one with the Law of Beasts and the other with the Law of the Great Maw. It really much depends on what you prefer, though I myself prefer the Law of the Great Maw. Since it's very early campaign, I'm recruiting a Tyrant to begin with because I want some brute strength, so let's go over its abilities and all that. Tyrants have their own unique skill line, which will focus on making them a bit stronger when it comes to damage, getting more money from raiding, and so on. They're in fact quite the melee powerhouse. You can see that stat-wise they're really, really good as it starts, high armor value, high health value, high leadership, high speed. While spellcasters are generally the best way to go because, you know, magic is very useful, there's still a reason to bring out the tyrants. They can do a lot of damage, they can slap anything out of the way. They're also able to take on any big monsters too, provided that you boost them up a little bit, because a bloodthirster is still going to be a bloodthirster. Right, let's get into the really interesting stuff. Let's talk about camps. Camps are going to be something that you're going to want to start establishing as you start progressing through your campaign. Once you start moving into different provinces, but not too close to other settlements, you'll be able to set up a camp, which are rather limited. You get more through skill points and obviously through your tech tree. But what makes a camp so special is that it's a settlement. You heard me correctly, what you're doing is you're building a settlement. This is a proper settlement with its own garrison. It works as a horde that can't move, but this is a physical thing. Camps themselves work as your capitals of sorts. You'll have a tyrant there, you'll be able to build up some armies and so on to be able to keep it defended. You actually get to pick the garrison, but this is what gets you all the way to tier 5, has access to all your different things, not only in advanced military, but basic military, loads more infrastructure stuff. Your whole roster can be recruited from camps. Camps themselves have access to 10 building slots in total, 1 being kept for your main building, and you're able to play around as you wish. You're able to pretty much get your whole roster through 1 building. They will also have a great boon to not only generating meat for local armies in a pretty large area, but also have pretty good access to some more economy. It very much depends on how you want to build it, but these in essence are your faction capitals. You can have multiple camps, and you can choose exactly where to build them, which is a great thing. Since you can choose where to place them, it really much depends on what you want. I've placed one at the beginning of the Darklands because I wanted to lead an invasion here. I have to keep this very well defended too, as there's multiple factions I'm at war with, so I have to build up their garrison. But obviously I can reduce their upkeep quite dramatically so they won't cost so much. It's not like having another full army. And yes, like I said, since you can build up your garrison, you're able to have a doom stack there to protect it, or whatever you think is the most powerful. It's more or less easy enough to defend, I'd say. If you want the best units in your army, you're going to want to establish a camp as soon as possible. From my own playstyles, it's very possible to do one in, say for example, the Mountains of Morn, but due to the twists and turns, it might be easier to put it, well, you know, in flat land, because that way you don't have to move around so much. The camp is stationary, but this is for future armies and so on. Contracts are a unique mechanic only available to the ogres, and it follows their mercenary-like nature. If anyone follows their lore, it's very easy to hire ogres as long as you throw enough food at them, well, in this case it's treasury, and different factions will offer different contracts over a certain amount of time. So as you can see early on, they'll offer a little bit of treasury and quite high diplomatic relations. This very much depends on what you want. They'll pull out a target and so on, and you can decide if you want to follow this or not. So if you want to boost up with the Darkland Orcs, you can. If you want to boost up with another ogre tribe, you can. It depends on your difficulty, your playstyle and all that. This does become very useful, however. For example, this other set of contracts, one specifically from the Bloodmaw, again, treasury, diplomatic relations, and camp growth plus 100 for all camps for 5 turns. That's absolutely massive, especially since camps themselves kind of level up like hordes, so you're going to be able to get them going really, really fast. The faster you can build up your camps, the faster you get access to endgame units, which obviously leads to better armies overall, and just a more powerful campaign. This is pretty random, but benefits like these are absolutely welcome. Taking over full provinces is still very much encouraged, and you will get edicts from it. I'll be cycling through them on screen right now. The best one I'd say is Feast for the Strong, which increases your control, growth, and obviously reduce the campaign movement range of any enemies around this area, starting their turn in this region of course, but that's going to be very, very useful in case you get into too many battles, and if you're playing as ogres, you're going to be getting into lots of battles, so many enemies will try to invade you. Slaughtermasters are your other generic lore choice, which you can either have with the Lore of the Great Maw or the Lore of Beasts. They are a spellcaster lord, but very able to do damage in melee because, well, you know, ogres, and they have access to a small unique skill line, which will increase casualty replenishment, some regeneration, extra control, some leadership for Lord's army, poison attacks. There's quite a bit here, so you're going to be wanting to recruit them anyway because, you know, spellcasters are quite strong, but in general, they have stuff to give them flavor and make them a lot stronger stronger in melee, so you wouldn't be too worried about them being in the front line. Butchers are very much the same in terms of being a generic hero choice spellcaster with either the Lore of Beasts or the Lore of the Great Maw. They also have a unique skill line which will make them stronger, give them regeneration and so on, and just being quite powerful in general. Ogres are kinda, they can do it all. Well, you know, you can have them doing combat, you can have them casting spells, they're pretty good. And for the last generic hero choice, we have the Firebelly. This is a spellcaster with a Lore of Fire. They have quite a lot to them. They're very popular on the tabletop, surprisingly. And not only that, but they're very strong. You can use them in front line once again. Well, you know, ogres. But they also have access to their own unique skill lines. Not only will they have access to, say, for example, the Lore of Fire, but they'll have access to fire-based abilities too, meaning that they're very multi-use. Their own unique skill line will even give them up to Vanguard deployment too, which is quite interesting. It very much depends on what you want to use this for, but the Lore of Fire itself is very, very popular, so I always try to bring a Firebelly with me because, I mean, it's just cool. You know, Burning Head is a pretty good spell and all that. So this is an overview of the Ogre Kingdom mechanic and campaign and so on. You can see that I've had a pretty decent army and it's turn 58. I could have probably had it sooner, but the problem is that I was experimenting with a few things and so on. There's just so many ways to play the ogres, but what I'm going to do now is I'm going to allow the in-game cinematic thing for the Over Tyrant Crown to play for a little bit, and then when we get into that fight specifically, I'm going to talk about my thoughts about the Ogre Kingdom campaign, and we can go from there. There are a few other ogre-related videos coming out today, however.
My crown ain't as shiny as it used to be. That's your fault. You let this orc rampage through my lands without giving him any bother. That stops now. This battle's gonna be huge. That ain't no lie. And no one dies better than I brawls this git here. Now, we're gonna swallow him whole, chew on his eyeballs, and throw his nads into the fire now. Right, let's get to it!
So the Ogre Kingdoms themselves are very, very different, even when comparing them to all the very different factions available at launch, and that was quite surprising to me. I've always been a big fan of the Ogre Kingdoms. I've been a very big fan from, well, the 8th edition stuff, really, because they were just a really good army book, and I'm actually really happy to see so much of the army book being translated. Yes, we have a lot of stuff that's missing, like, say, for example, units and characters and so on, but as a whole, as a pre-order race, keep in mind that we had the Warriors of Chaos and Norska being pre-order races too. Like, this is so much better than both of them. Like, both of them combined. It is a very good interpretation. The Ogre Kingdoms as a whole are quite different to get used to, mainly because you have to deal with meat. Most of your army is large, and there's a lot of enemies which have anti-large. They have bows, artillery, and obviously, you know, spears, halberds, and so on. So you have to be very careful as how you use your guys, but you have such a diverse roster, which might not seem so big, because obviously it's not so big, but you have loads of different weapon variants too, which will make the game a lot more different. It's very interesting in a way on how to use an army which is pretty much all large. You have very little stuff, just 2 Noblar units which are tiny and, well, normal sized, where everything else is small units. You don't have big rosters, you don't have big armies. They're, what, 16 per group? It's definitely something that you need to get used to because you have very small armies. You don't have like units with 80 entities and so on. But the ogres are so incredibly powerful, not just in melee combat because, you know, that's what ogres do, but your range with your lead belchers and your iron blasters and so on. You have a very multi-purpose faction. I, for one, think they're extremely fun to play, and I'm just so happy once again that they've been translated so well from the tabletop. This is something that's really, really important to me because the ogres themselves are just generally fun. Your ogre economy is a bit brutal, and obviously not having access to anything like, say, for example, proper settlements, well, you do, but, you know, without getting to tier 5 and so on, you are forced with the camps. The camp system is good, but since it's quite limited, you have to be very strategic on where you place them. It would be nice to eventually get access to more and so on. Expansion is very doable. The fact that both starting positions are so radically different. You've got Greasus there in the Mountains of Morn, which is the lore-friendly start. Then you've got Scrog in the Lands of the Empire, which if you want to play them twice, it gives you incentive because you'll be fighting from 2 different aspects. Now, again, they're doing the whole main storyline thing, which it looks like any races that do get introduced and maybe even other factions will all focus around this storyline. Hopefully that's not the case. And it makes sense for the ogres to want to eat the bear god because, I mean, you know, it's still food. All in all, I'd say it's a very enjoyable campaign. You've got loads of different stuff to play around with. The mechanics are all very, very unique. Food will still be an issue, I will say that. I did have issues with myself because even though it's right there on top of your army name, yeah, you will sometimes miss that. So keeping a good eye on food is the most important thing there if you don't want your campaign to go south very, very quickly. My only real gripe is that the roster could do with a few more things, a few more monsters that are missing and so on, but I'm imagining that that's future DLC, and I would say that the missing doesn't affect the Ogre Kingdoms whatsoever. You can still have a lot of fun with them, and I can say that now because now the review embargo's dropped. So yeah, as a pre-order incentive, the ogres are totally worth it, and I've really, really enjoyed playing them. Hopefully we'll see more of them in the future, like I said, for more content. But what do you guys think about the ogres? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and let's start a bit of a discussion. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like, or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. In the description section below are various links to different social media platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, and Discord. Also in the description section is an affiliate link with Element Games where you could buy loads of hobby-based products, not just Warhammer, for 10 to 25% off. Making a purchase using that link and also our special code, which is also in the description, supports the channel at no extra cost to you, which we think is rather cool. A big thank you to our patrons. Your support means the world to us. It's amazing that people want to help a small channel like us grow and get to a higher level of content. A big thank you to Gibraltar LUSC, Ryan Bertsche, Andrew Prince, and Okro for subscribing to us at our Fane level. You guys are super cool. And a big thank you to Edward Yule, VS Vasan, Aaron Whitman, and Shaggy for subscribing to us at our King level. Honestly, we can't thank you all enough. And lastly, a big thank you to all of you for liking, sharing, and commenting on these videos. Honestly, it's because of you guys that the channel has been growing at such a great pace lately, so we can't thank you all enough. But with that, my friends, thank you so much for watching once again, and we shall see you all again very, very soon. Have a good day.